Footprint structures, and again, it's a 2-day trade. Is it, or is it one day that builds into another one? I think I'm maybe leaning towards sort of that structure because it's not massively clear, like breakout style. This is it. I'll just do it. This is what it looked like as the 2 days combined over, say, from the open, I think it was, or Bank of Japan move, etc., into the next day, and then this is what you ended up getting over sort of the due course of the day. And then the bund bounced up a little bit and sort of stayed there as it cut it a bit short because I started doing it a bit earlier. This is how I think I will then like present it. Using this profile is mainly the biggest key for me. So what I ended up thinking about is this move had no value move with the shift up, which was those ECB sources move. You had another move higher, but in this, to me, in this profile structure you've got, I'm just using a cash one here. I use them quite a lot over the bonds, basically. This profile here, to me, looks very flat, very weak. You can see the volume's quite weak as well, and a lot of the TPOs are overlapping. There's no single prints or anything like that. There's no real, as you get here, these little kickouts, or it's all very flat, and you know, it's maximum, I think, 9 TPOs wide or anything like that. I felt like that was quite a weak poor structure, this zone here, that I feel like basically just needed to trade back down. How it does it is a different sort of question, and you'll see how maybe tricky it was and sort of how I thought about it and what I actually basically done completely wrong. And again, this goes down to what your plan structure is and etc. So the error that I ended up making was throughout this whole period is, so with all that structure in mind, how you get short, you did have a pop up and false break the day's high previously to that. So I was like, okay, it's a bit interesting. Maybe we can't then go back up and test it. If you can, and it starts trending up higher, then okay. Sort of that trade sort of maybe a little bit over, or what structure it builds above that. You just have to keep adapting throughout the day. What you ended up having was Knott's comment on multiple 50s. I was in for this. There was only literally hardly anybody was in. I think 2 of us were in. Didn't trade it very particularly well because you had the Villeroy the day before, sort of a really soft denial versus Knott's multiple 50s denial, and like very, explained it very well. What I tried to start doing here was I ended up setting the VWAP around here somewhere because I quite like these moves that you get a move which was actually like 720-ish. Probably I think it's a little bit earlier, like the 8 o'clock move to do this and then come back and then you have another leg, etc. That's the sort of play I like. But I tried to play this early. I like the idea of what we had already going, so I was trying to, can I get a short idea onto this? And again, I feel like this sort of trade idea requires a lot more planning maybe than being more of an aggressive style and trying to play breakouts and stuff like that. Different sort of style because you're being aggressive, buying levels, selling levels, and you're expecting it to break straight away. This is more of a passive idea. I end up pretty much getting out at the top here. I was short bobble at the same time. A lot of basically frustration started to build up from this whole comment. I wasn't exactly very prepared. I got in at my usual 7-ish or whatever, 7:15. I didn't know Knott was actually scheduled to speak, and then I didn't really prepare very quickly to sort of what he could say. And then I was very hesitant with multiple 50s if Villeroy's denied it. And again, what you got to think of is how high you are, etc. Me not being the best news trader ever sort of comes a bit more puzzled very quickly, where other guys are very different. And again, comments something I'm trying to get, hell of a lot better at throughout the whole year. But my whole idea was trying to build into this. And I think the whole Knott comment basically kicked the whole idea off. Did squeeze all the way back, but you'd have made some money here trading that comment and thinking, okay, the idea of this is still short. Repricing as well, we had to look at the arrival, that come off, reverse the whole move from the ECB sources. This isn't a very tricky move, and it's very a bit dribbly, and it's how you can get short. Maybe it's not super high conviction, but you can sort of build a great idea from it. So you ended up having that move. This ended up coming down. I was trying to buy in here, stupidly enough. What else was I trying to do? The whole idea went out the window, basically. Lagarde come in. To me, she didn't really say anything hawkish, really, to be explicit. But people were sort of, preempting, front-running the move. You've got that final flush, which I say, in the notes, that the final flush probably would have been your out, because I think that was the best thing. I know it only traded down to sort of like this part of the day, and in the end you did get basically down to like the bottom of the day. But again, it's like having the whole vision of how this would play out and knowing you're going to have to hold it from whenever. It's like even if you hold it here, 8 o'clock, and the lows at, you know, say 4-hour trade, etc. You got to think of it like that, and you know your pullbacks are going to be quite large. And this is where I think the planning has got to be much better, and you've got to see these trades multiple times to sort of get the hang of it a bit more. I then started to fade Lagarde, didn't make any money on that. I got caught, I was long in here, I can't remember now. There's a piece where Lagarde and then it really flushed against me. I can't exactly remember where it was. But what my whole idea ended up becoming was an absolute mess. That's how I traded it in the end. The whole idea went out the window. I ended up, so the VWAP, nice little footprint structure, quite low volume here, ledged out, sold it, it went straight down, raced straight down, sold it really small size. And I started selling more and more up here and ended up puking around up here. It builds a nice footprint structure in the end, and I say here, it's like you've got to be very patient and let it build this sort of structure before then it comes off, because you get a nice entry point once it breaks back through again, so you can start trying to really build the position. I think that's what I need to get much better at, is sitting offside, how you build your position, be more patient. It comes back into like this little low volume point, auctions it out, does the little like VWAP pop up and then come back down. You see them quite a few times. And I think it just comes from a lack of like the preparation that you got from, I don't mind selling here, then I average up the page a little bit, but then you need to have the patience, you need to let it build, it could squeeze you. You're not really right, you're trying to literally playing the structures of what's happening. The market does need to reprice with what he says really, realistically. So that was sort of the error that I did make. So like you say, Knots move, then this was it. It sold it straight down, and then pretty much it just felt like it was one time frame up, it pretty much was. And it became very painful. And I didn't really know, again, when you like selling a little bit higher, you don't really have a clear stop. I was maybe looking at this little low over here. I don't think it reaches it. I end up getting out around here before then it comes off from this point, and I'm like, okay, great. The whole idea is there, but my execution and plan isn't good enough, and the patience sitting in the trade, like I did a gold trade a few days later, similar sort of scenario, but I managed to be more patient. And again, it's all about what size you're putting on, you know, and you're trying to build that, and I'm trying to like really lean on when you're getting these good footprint structures. I thought a bit of volume here, bit of volume here, it does this, it's quite nice. It does that little pop up once it comes back inside, oh that's good. And it just doesn't, and then sweeps straight back through, and it causes you a little bit more pain. Okay, how do you manage that? Where your risk is then, you cut some and then you let it build, and I think that's the best way. You're trying to just learn on how to trust and believe in the footprint structures, following your idea. Yeah, and again, I start buying down here, I started buying here, the guy started speaking, it just dumped at me, and I'm like, okay, basically just lose, basically by losing all stimulated from that comment there, this puke here, getting frustrated, and it's something I never ever do. I never then start going against like your plan. I'm thinking, oh, this is going to squeeze. I started getting more aggressive through here. I think I was long bobble because I'm good size in that at the same time. And at one point, you're actually doing okay on the day, making like an average day, whatnot. And then it all goes to pot, and you lose it all, and it comes back very quickly. So we had that point of that one day. Like that's me explaining what ended up happening on that day, having that whole structure, whole idea. It all worked out very well in the end, without me making any sort of like money with it, but that's sort of like the emotions throughout the whole day of how it sort of happened. So if I follow into, I believe I've spoke about it all. Again, that's just a bubble chart of what happened there. So I follow it from that one into, no. So this is the second day where this is where it builds another piece of structure. So what you ended up having is, so you ended up double topping, there's the false break, comes back down, overnight does the little auction, it does a little bounce, it fails to bounce. So the overnight then fails to bounce. And in the whole idea of trying to have this 2-day continuation, I think it's quite hard to have it from up here. I have the whole idea that it could come back and trade these lows. The fact that they held above these lows, I think then becomes the importance that you've got a nice interaction point in this little black box here for then to have that move. Then you had the sources piece here, and this candle, and you can then trade back through it. I think that's the key point of this ended up here building the next day, where you would have maybe got out on this move back down, hold it for a few hours, this builds, because again, you're letting it bounce like 60 ticks in your face here. If you're short overnight, you'll be like, okay, I was literally nearly sort of the target idea. And I think that's the key point to take. I think it's one trade, builds, and then your next day you've got another. But this structure just builds a conviction into this day, I believe. I think that's the way I'm sort of trying to look at it. And again, it was very much of a dribble. And the way I feel about this was, okay, the whole idea is here to then trade and break low, break this zone. That was it. But how you do that's a different question. I was thinking, okay, how can ideally, I was looking at basically breaks this low to this low. That was going to be your access point. What it ended up doing was basically just ticking through it. And the volume doesn't really pick up a lot. And that's another thing I was trying to look at. If you're being aggressive, playing lows, you want some good volume. I mean, obviously, I think the low was the highest volume candle. So for me, the structure just wasn't there enough. So therefore, I didn't trade this move. I sold it in here, ran it down a little bit, I think. Then I just got out. Didn't want to try and trade it for a home run. My target really was around 40s, I think. Sorry. My target was around 40s, executed that a bit well at the top. You know, not a lot of size, just nice, decent, like one clip really, and ran it around for sort of 25 ticks in the end. That was okay. But I think when you look back at it, I was really trying to get, okay, how can I get some structure, which is in here to get short, then, okay, maybe this bounds, and maybe I'm getting the too much footprint in my head idea rather than playing the aggressive. And again, towards last year, technicals weren't really working as much playing these aggressive breaks. As you can see, the volume here isn't much. It's lighting up very small in here, and it couldn't, this zone here I thought was the best place I could get a little bit of auction. Can I get something away to have the trade into here? Which again, it just basically ticked straight through, like just rolled like tick, tick, tick. It wasn't so easy to then start smacking the low. Because if that was picking up the volume in that really key point, I thought that was great, because even though it pulls back to sort of this low, the 06s, selling in here would have been fine. You'd have watched it gone on side nicely, watched it bounce. Been in a bit more of a painful situation. In my head, I was thinking, when I'm short in here, I was like, if I started selling in here and here, and I had some good size, and I'd be panicking like sort of mad that it's bounced this back, I've let it come this far back, blah, blah. But then I'm sitting here trying to then sell this area and then believe in it. So that's the sort of way I was sort of thinking at that point, that I would normally be stressing at this point now, rather than if I was short over here, I'd be stressing out in this zone, when actually I'm not stressing out in this zone because I'm not short in this zone. Very interesting sort of way to put it, because then I need to sort of, when you are trading this zone, you do get this zone, don't stress out in this zone again. So you're trying to then not compare it, but move that sort of emotion over from there into this one. But when it happens, have that emotion that you're trying to get short if you've got a bit of a panic zone. But as you can see, that sort of dribbled down. Footbit doesn't offer you much. This was the rest of sort of the day dribble. And again, it's just like new low bounce, new low bounce. Bounce again as it double makes a new low, bounces, eventually makes a new low, bounces. It's just like one where how you can keep the hold period on for as long as you can. And going back to like the main part of what I was really looking at, and this is how I got short. Sold it in here, and it created like the ledge point, and then it popped out. I sold a bit more. Yes, it popped back in a little bit, but I felt like that was your best place to then start getting short after this move. And again, it comes back to the stress of, if you're short, say like here, why are you then you're gonna sell? Like if you've got some good size, you can even sell some more here. And it's like leaning on these extra entry points that you're getting. And I would usually stress out if I've been on here, bounces, does this, then it holds, then it goes. I'm like, I should always sell more back here. but now you're moving those emotions over from that zone. But basically that's what I sort of wanted to sort of really look at. And again, you've got this structure, like volume looking B-shape, TPO looking B-shape, it's not really liquidation down. Then you get this zone, because that's it. The way I was looking at it is sort of tiny, nearly an inside day. And again, this structure then becomes a little bit weak because of this. I think if it wanted to be more strong, it could have bounced back up here and auctioned and built this structure out and built like this more profile out on that flat side from this one, but instead you got that breakdown. I was looking in just below this low and hit that low to get your access, but as I say, you just tick through. But then I started to think, you got to look for the continuation. There's your target down here, take these single prints. Basically, over here, that's what it done. These sort of like auction out area from there. So sort of like the outcomes, I think, from which was this trade was the outcome that I think, or whatever I've written down, is having that clear plan in place, especially for sort of both days. The understanding's there, but the plan obviously clearly just went out the window on that first day. The second day, I think, it was built by the first day and how the first day ended, and a little bit overnight. But I think you can still build good conviction. It's like a second day continuation move, I'm going to call it, rather than maybe a 2-day sort of play. Yeah, 2 separate days sort of move. That real key break point, and that becomes the key point is that, where you sold off by the first day, you can gain real conviction from that. The break point where it ticked through, okay, you remember how it traded, how you get in that. The pullback, I think the pullback's the great point of conviction to try and get some shorts and good size up there to let it run down. And then again, the both days, I don't think they're the most easiest trades to execute. How much you can have conviction over these. The passive entries, the second day. I think you can be more aggressive. I think the second day is an easier trade than the first day, because you have the not comment and then being more passive after that. I think the not comment triggers it all from the start, but it's all built, 2 days of, 2 good trades. Yes, they're harder trades, they're not your fast money trades, but you can still understand a bit of direction and play sort of that, like passive continuation type moves. That's how I sort of was looking at it in the end, the whole idea. It's very easy to think about where a market can go, from A to B, but how it gets there is sort of a different question. Remember, you're letting all these markets bounce on you as well when the market's trading that. You're always letting these 20-tick bounces, and you're trying to, if you've got a good size and you've got that real conviction, it's not going to be too much of an issue. But otherwise, it becomes a bit more of like a stress ball game, because sometimes these days can just like completely reverse in your face. But that'll be it from me today. Normal information if you want to get in touch, info@axiafutures.com. I'll be back soon. Cheers, guys.